It's deck days at Lowe's, and the savings are stacked. Right now, pros get 15% off all in-stock composite decking from top brands like Trex, TimberTech, and Decorators. Plus, get a free DeWalt 20-volt max 5-amp-hour battery when you buy a select DeWalt tool. The deck's stacked in your favor with brands pros trust. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 4/22 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
How you doing, everybody? Welcome to a new episode of Scott Fox After 9. I want to give you a heads up right off the bat that today's episode is going to be very Ontario-centric. And I know, I hear about it all the time. Scott, I'm listening in British Columbia. I don't care about Ontario politics. I understand. I hear you. But I'll tell you what, this is actually an interesting story. I'm going to do the follow-up and maybe even the conclusion, because I don't know if this story is finished being written about Doug Ford's brand new jet that he purchased and then decided a few days later he was going to sell because he got a lot of backlash from the public. You're going to hear Ontario Premier Doug Ford's news conference. You're also going to hear from the leader of the opposition on this. It's going to be a fun episode right here on Scott Fox After 9. Before I get to that, two things, though. For everyone in Alberta, I'm told the decision is made. Premier Danielle Smith is going to keep Alberta on daylight savings time. And that's good. No more changing the clock. I get the impression, the vibe, if I'm reading the room right, that a lot of people don't like changing the clock twice a year. I hear it every time we do it. Here's my question, though. Is daylight savings time the best time to be on? Because I'm wondering, should we just one more time change the clocks in the fall and then leave ourselves on standard time? There's pros and cons to both. Me, as a morning person, I kind of like a little more daylight in the morning. I know that golfers and farmers and people that do things in the morning, they would probably prefer a little more daylight in the morning. When we're on daylight savings time permanently, we get later sunsets, but less light during the day. I think that Alberta should reconsider that. I think one more time change this fall, get us back to standard time, and then leave the clocks where they are. Alberta's decided to go a different way. That is their prerogative. That is going to leave them aligned with British Columbia. So that's some news coming out of Alberta. Now I want to head south of the border because I want to follow up on something that I talked about yesterday. Over the last number of years, a number of prominent scientists have either gone missing or been found dead under mysterious circumstances. And you know, one scientist, okay. Two scientists, weird, but maybe a coincidence. Three scientists, again, very weird, but maybe a coincidence there. There's now 11 of them that are either missing or dead under very suspicious circumstances. And that's one that a lot of people are concerned about, particularly south of the border. These scientists, they were working on nuclear projects. Apparently, some of them were working on defense and propulsion systems and things like that. These are scientists that I would think the U.S. has a vested interest in keeping alive. So who's killing them or kidnapping them? Who's doing that and why? Yesterday on Fox News, John Roberts was talking to the House Oversight Committee Chair, James Comer. Sounds like they're considering this a criminal investigation now.
Well, it does appear that there's a high possibility that something sinister is taking place here. This has been going on, obviously, for the last 3 years. So what I found in 3.5 years as chairman of the House Oversight Committee is sometimes government agencies don't do a good job of sharing information on situations like this. So we've asked all those agencies, the Department of Energy, NASA, the Department of War, to all share information with us so that we can see if we can put it together and find any missing links to try to solve what's going on here, because it's very unlikely that this is a coincidence. So Congress is very concerned about this. Our committee is making this one of our priorities now because we view this as a national security threat.
They view it as a national security threat, and frankly, I don't blame them. That's really weird. Here's my question to you. Who's doing this and why? What's your theory? Let me hear it. If you've got a theory about who's doing this and why, slide into my DMs at Scott Fox on Air. I don't like to put out too many conspiracy theories here, but I'll tell you what, I'm interested in any theory that might bring us a little bit closer to understanding what's going on here. And when those come in, I will share them with you on the pod. Now, let's get to the point of this episode. Let's talk about Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He bought what some call the gravy plane. Although I'm not sure that we gave fair consideration to Air Ford One, Air Canada Doug, Con Air. I thought those were all good names too, but we'll go with the gravy plane for now. And of course, the Premier has announced that he's going to sell it. He is not going to keep that plane. He, in a few minutes, will tell you in his own words that he heard from lots of taxpayers and they don't like it. Well, before we hear from the Premier, let's hear from the leader of the opposition in Ontario. Her name is Marit Stiles, and here is her yesterday in the Ontario legislature.
A strip club, a luxury spa, and a private jet. What do these things have in common? No, Speaker, this is not the itinerary for a bachelor party. These are items that appear in the province's books. It is so ridiculous, but unfortunately, it is true. While the Premier was obsessing over what color leather would go in his private luxury jet, he was lecturing Ontario's post-secondary students, telling them to work harder and make better choices. So to the Premier, how come when it comes to OSAP, there's no money, but when it comes to shiny toys for the Premier, there's plenty?
That's a good question as far as I'm concerned. One of my major issues with the Premier in Ontario is not just that he gutted OSAP funding, but he did it with no notice at all. Left parents and students scrambling. Higher tuition, less grants. That means more loans. And the other part of that bothered me was the way he went after students. He chastised them. He taunted them with things like money doesn't grow on trees. He made fun of the courses that they take, like their basket weaving courses is what he called them. He said, we don't have the money. It's not sustainable. We can't keep that OSAP stuff going. And then he dropped $29 million on a private jet. Not that one has to do with the other. There's different parts of the budget for different things that we spend money on. I understand all that, and I'm sure you do as well. But it doesn't change the fact that the amount of money that he spent on this jet is roughly what was missing from the OSAP pot, and that would have been able to keep that OSAP funding flowing for at least a couple of years. I don't have a problem with Doug Ford cutting OSAP. It certainly needs some reform. But you got to give people notice. You can't hang them out to dry and announce something in April that takes effect in September when some families have been saving for years for their kids post-secondary. That is a bias that I have. I'm not a fan of the way Premier Doug Ford handled that particular situation. And sure enough, Marit Stiles is tapped into that. Here is more of the leader of the opposition.
A mini fridge, a 32-inch TV, a Blu-ray player, the Premier's emergency landing, reselling his brand new luxury jet is raising more questions than it has answered. We deserve to know how every dollar was spent on this greedy scheme, including the penalties, including the resale losses. Last time the Premier tried to purchase a souped-up man cave, as I recall, it was a man cave on wheels with taxpayer dollars. He spent nearly $50,000 getting a mini fridge, a 32-inch TV, a Blu-ray player, I leave it there, and a leather recliner. How much did the Premier spend on decking out his private jet?
Okay, what Marit is referring to there is shortly after Premier Ford was elected, when he said he didn't want to use the Premier's plane, he wanted to drive across Ontario and meet the folks. They did get a vehicle to drive the Premier around in, and they souped it up. They thought, if the Premier is going to be driving from one end of the province to the other, we're going to make sure this thing is luxurious and comfortable for the Premier. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, he does preside over a pretty large economy, and we do expect him to be our best salesman. So I don't really have a problem with that, but I certainly understand people are drawing parallels. People are starting to wonder, is Doug Ford really the guy he says he is? You know, he says he's for the people, but every time we turn around, it's a new scandal, and a lot of them involve money being spent in a way that taxpayers wouldn't necessarily agree with. And there's not a lot of clarity on why either, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of transparency, and they certainly aren't very proactive about some of the decisions that they make and disclosing the reasons for them. One more from Marit Stiles, and then I'm going to get to Doug Ford's news conference.
This premier's mid-air U-turn is not going to get him out of this mess. I promise I'm going to return it, is not going to cut it, and it certainly won't make the $30 million line item disappear from the province's books. So I don't know if there's a 30-day return policy on luxury jets, but I do know that ultimately Ontarians are still going to be on the hook for the penalties and the resale losses and whatever money this province and this government have already spent on souping up the jet plane. So will the premier come clean and tell us how much canceling this deal will actually cost the people of this province?
Okay. Hey, that's fair. You've heard from the opposition. You've heard one side of the argument there from Marit Stiles, who is representing the side that thinks that was a frivolous purchase at the wrong time for Ontario. Okay, well, let's hear from the premier. Doug Ford is in Ottawa right now. He had some meetings yesterday, and he did a news conference. And you know what? Full credit to him. He was able to read the room. He knew exactly how this news conference was going to go. In fact, he started it that way.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here in Ottawa, and I guess the topic that we're going to talk about is the plane. And I heard loud and clear, because I'm the only person in the world that gives out a cell number. And I heard loud and clear from the people that this was not the time to purchase a plane. So I've directed the staff, provincial staff, to be in contact, which they are, with Bombardier. Sell it immediately and at the same cost. We took possession last week. I immediately sent that message out to the media. I heard from the people, and I'm the premier that listens to the people. If they don't like something, I'm not too shy to change my mind and say, okay, this isn't the time to move on.
Okay, I'm going to leave the premier there, but I am going to interrupt him from time to time and offer a little bit of commentary. Doug Ford there saying that as soon as we took possession here in Ontario, he sent a note out to the media. Initially, it was the Toronto Star that broke this story. Rob Benzies did that one. And frankly, I'm trying to figure out what's true and what's not. Because I was under the impression that the Toronto Star broke this story, that they had some sort of an exclusive. Premier Ford is suggesting he intentionally told the media, and I guess only the Star picked it up at first. That's kind of a weird one. Doug Ford pointed out he gives out his cell phone number. That is true. You can Google it. Doug Ford does give out his cell phone number, and he is happy to take calls from constituents, he says. Although he also acknowledges he's like 300 calls behind at the moment. But, good on him. At least he'll actually talk to people. Premier Ford is saying he recognizes there's some backlash, and that's why he is sending that jet back. He told Bombardier he wants it sold, and he wants it sold for what we paid for it. I don't know if that's possible. I'd love to have a private jet. I think most people would, but I'm not quite sure how it works when you sell one of them. Is it like a car where as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's worth less than before you drove it off the lot? Is it like that? And this was used to begin with. What is the market like for a used jet in the $30 million range? That I don't know, but I'm hoping that when it does eventually sell, someone is going to tell us, hey, we got exactly what we paid for it.
I also understand the scrutiny. There's no one in this country that is scrutinized more than I am. I'm willing to take that. What kind of... really?
No one in the country is scrutinized more than Doug Ford. Okay, all right, I'll bite. There's a reason for that. I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with the premier. He does get a fair bit of scrutiny as a premier, but that's because he's the premier of the most populous province in the country. He's also getting a lot of scrutiny, particularly lately, because he's announced a series of wildly unpopular policies, not the least of which changing the way freedom of information requests are done. He's going to keep a lot of stuff secret. Doug Ford has been ordered by the courts. Turn over your cell phone records. Turn them over because there was some business being done on his personal cell phone. Doug not only refuses to turn those cell phone records over, he's changing the law and he's making it retroactive so that he doesn't have to give up his phone records. And that's a major sticking point for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like that the premier is keeping secrets. Let's hear the rest of what he had to say.
What disturbs me is the inconsistency with the media. We have the federal government, rightfully so, and let's put the Prime Minister to the side, that they went out and bought $753 million of jets for the ministers, rightfully so, by the way. We live in a massive country. No word. When it comes to the Quebec, buying $107 million of 3 jets, which I agree. They live in a massive province. No scrutiny. But when I do it, I guess there's a double standard, and that's my position. I have to take that. But I just want to explain to the people, our province is massive. I have to get to the north numerous times. There are no charter flights up in the north. And speaking of charter flights, no premier in the history of this province, when I took office, I sold the 2 planes. I think people didn't think that premiers had planes. They've had planes ever since the inception of premiers flying on the plane. I flew charter for 6 years, and no premier's ever done that. And I don't begrudge anyone. I don't begrudge the ministers. They need it, right? Federal ministers. Quebec needs it. Former premiers need it. I chose not to do that and flew charter. Now what's happening, charter, they're canceling stops in pretty well majority of all northern jurisdictions, or they'll have one flight going into Thunder Bay or one flight maybe into Sudbury. Here they're canceling the Sudbury side.
Okay, the premier is kind of rambling a little bit here, and he's saying charter. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right word in this circumstance. The premier is pointing out that usually he flies commercial, and commercial flights are getting limited in options, particularly to the north. There's nothing wrong with the premier chartering a plane. If he has to get his entourage to a specific place, it makes sense that if there's not a scheduled flight, that they charter a flight. And there are many, many, many different options. Rather than spending $30 million on a jet, maybe we could have just got him a premium NetJets account. That's basically like Uber for private jets. There's lots and lots and lots of different options if he needs to charter a plane to get somewhere that does not have scheduled flights from the commercial carriers. Fine. I want to go back to something else the premier was talking about, a double standard in the media. Now, part of the reason I do this podcast is because there is a double standard in the media. The media is wildly unfair in their criticism of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. They're wildly favorable towards the government, Mark Carney. Does the same apply with Doug Ford? Because I'm really not sure. If there is a double standard, I'm not sure that this is it. But he does have kind of a point. There wasn't a lot of scrutiny when Quebec bought their jets. By the way, I'm led to believe those Quebec jets are actually being used for medevac situations, medical, transporting patients. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, and I don't care what goes on in Quebec. To be perfectly honest with you, Quebec taxpayers should pay for it. I personally don't get a lot of Quebec news here in Ontario. When it comes to the federal government, no, there wasn't a lot of scrutiny when the federal government ordered a whole bunch of new jets, including a new jet for the Prime Minister. Listen, sometimes we need to buy things. Sometimes we've got to spend money. And while those purchases may seem frivolous, sometimes there may actually be a need. Like I said yesterday, I don't necessarily begrudge Doug Ford buying a jet. What I have a problem with is wasting money. And it seems to me that it's a waste of money for all of the provinces to have a fleet of jets when we've already got a fleet of jets that is for the federal government. And I don't understand why at a time when money is tight at all levels, every government is running a serious deficit and a massive budget, a massive debt. I don't understand why they can't share resources. The federal government's jets are maintained and operated by the Royal Canadian Air Force. And when the Prime Minister has to go somewhere, the Prime Minister's office lets the military know. They send the Prime Minister's jet. They pick him up in Ottawa, take him where he needs to be. Then they return him safely to Ottawa. I don't understand why the same option can't be available for the premiers. Yes, he does need to get around, for sure. just like some of our federal officials need to get around. I don't have a problem with that, and I don't have a problem with them flying private. I just think that we need to make sure that these purchases make sense. Why are the Ontario taxpayers paying $30 million for a jet when we've got the RCAF there with a whole fleet of jets that are maintained to expert specs, gassed up and ready to go on a moment's notice with some of the best pilots in the world operating them? And it's the military, so presumably they're quite secure as well. I don't understand why they can't provide that service for all government officials. That would make sense to me, that we just have one fleet of jets and it's operated by the military and they coordinate getting people from A to B. I don't know why Ontario would need their own specific jet. But of course, it's not an issue anymore because they're selling the jet. I find that kind of funny. It is remarkable to me how quickly Doug Ford changed his mind on this issue. Some people say he had to change his mind. The amount of hatred that was getting thrown the Ontario PC party's way when people found out that Doug Ford bought himself a private jet, it was crazy. I'm told people were flipping out. So I guess he really didn't have a choice but to walk back that purchase and say, okay, fine, you don't want it, we'll get rid of it. Is there a double standard? Maybe. Maybe there is, actually, because there wasn't a whole lot of scrutiny on the federal government's purchase. There is scrutiny in this case, but I think part of that has to do with the fact that the Ontario PC government, they're kind of unpopular at the moment because of the OSAP cuts, because of the Freedom of Information request changes to that law, the fact that they buried it in the budget for some reason, as opposed to making it a standalone bill. There's also families waiting for money, funding for autism supports. There's also a crisis happening in healthcare. So a lot of people that feel we should be spending more on education. That's why I think people were so upset about this jet purchase. And I get it. But it doesn't mean we didn't need the jet or don't need some form of transportation for the premier.
One of the airlines. So I got to find another mode of transportation. And, that's what it comes down to. I'll give you an example. Why? Well, it's always the why. Why did I do it? This was not Doug Ford's plane. I'm going to repeat that. It was not Doug Ford's plane. It was a government plane used by multiple ministries. I'll give you one example. Ontario Corps. If we need to send a team up north where no commercial flights are, we charter a flight. We charter a flight for firefighters going up to fight wildfires. And I thought, if it's a multi-ministerial plane for the province, not my personal plane that the media wants to paint it out to be, which was never the case. Yes, am I going to use it? 100%. But it was for multiple ministries that could use it. And
before he goes on with the end, I just want to point out, we do have to move people around. Ontario is a huge province. As I said yesterday, I did double check it when I got home. Yeah, you could fit the United Kingdom in Ontario 5 times. It's a massive province. Now, a lot of it we aren't really using. A lot of it is forest area, and there isn't necessarily people living there or airports to land at anyway. Now, the premier is suggesting we would use it for all sorts of stuff, not just him. He used the example of when we've got to send firefighters into northern Ontario to fight forest fires. There was going to be nowhere for that Challenger jet to land up there. That's highly unlikely. They would likely use an airplane, but it probably would not be a Bombardier Challenger 650 that they would send firefighters into northern Ontario with. I get where he's going with it. He wouldn't be the only one using it, but that's probably a poor example.
I'll give you one example of, we had to get down to Texas because we're fighting the tariffs. There's no one been louder in the whole world against President Trump than what I've been. But we have to diversify our trade all around the world. But we also have to continue communicating with our largest customer in the world, and that's the United States. I flew down into Texas. I had 13 appointments in 2 days and one morning in 3 cities. I went to Austin. It's all on the media. I went to Austin. I went to Dallas. I went to Houston. We brought back, and I'm being super conservative, over $6 billion of investments here in Ontario, thousands and thousands of jobs. You can get on the phone, you can get on a Zoom call. Nothing is better than sitting across the table from your customer, meaning our customer, saying, come to Ontario, and telling them all the great things about the quality of the people here in Ontario. That's part of a premier's job.
It is part of a premier's job. I'm just wondering, what about these thousands of jobs? Who in Texas sat across the table from Doug Ford in Austin and said, yeah, we're going to create thousands and thousands of jobs in Ontario. $6 billion in investment. When are we going to get details about that? I don't know who would be opening up a business in Ontario right now under the circumstances. It's a lot of uncertainty. For an American company to say we're going to invest $6 billion in Ontario, I'd like to know a little bit more about that and where specifically these thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs are going to come from. That's an interesting one to me. I'd like more information on that.
Protect your pet with insurance from Pets Best. Plans start from less than $1 a day. Visit petsbest.com. Pet insurance products offered and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC, are underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company or Independence American Insurance Company. For terms and conditions, visit www.petsbest.com/policy. Products are underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company, Independence American Insurance Company, or MS Transverse Insurance Company, and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC. $1 a day premium based on 2024 average new policyholder data for accident and illness plans, pets age 0 to 10.
People don't realize how large Ontario is unless you've flown it. And flown it many times from north, south, east, west. It's twice the size of Texas. It's larger than France and Spain combined. So I have to do my job, and I'm going to continue doing it the way I always do. I'm going to continue working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, like any other premier does, and continue serving the people. I understand their concerns. I understand the cost of fuel is going up. I understand groceries are going up. I understand everything is going up, and it's costly. And I do appreciate the calls that I received saying this is not the time right now. I also appreciate the calls that said, yes, this is justified. So
who phoned Doug Ford? Who? Give me a name. Who phoned Doug Ford when the story dropped that he was spending almost $30 million on a private Challenger jet and said, good for you, Doug, this is justified? Who made that call? I want to know a name because I don't believe it. I don't believe even one person phoned Doug Ford, and he answered it, and they said, great job on spending that $30 million on a private jet. This is a great purchase. Good for you. I want to know who did it because I have a hard time believing that. I have no doubt there were a lot of people that reached out and complained, and Doug's right. It's not the right time. Well, the people that complained to Doug were right. It's not the right time. We have the biggest deficit in history in Ontario. A growing debt. What is it? Like $500 billion is our debt. And we have people that can't get basic supports for autism. We've got emergency rooms that are closing off hours. We have got families that have children on the autism spectrum that cannot get the therapies and supports that they need. We have a crisis happening in a lot of different areas. It's probably a little tone deaf to make that plane purchase now. And I'm glad that Doug realizes that now. I'm just wondering who thought it was a good idea in the first place and who thought it was a good idea to just do it and keep it quiet. Yeah, we don't really want the people to know about it. We'll tell them after we've got it and pretend like we've always had it. Was that the strategy? Or did everybody know sitting at the table, this is going to be wildly unpopular? This is going to possibly bring down our government. It will be so unpopular. Did anybody raise that red flag? Well, unfortunately, we'll never know because all of the cabinet stuff is covered under those Freedom of Information changes. That's unfortunate. A little more from Premier Ford here. I'm enjoying this.
We're doing it. We're moving forward. We're going to continue growing the economy. And I'm going to continue visiting everyone in the north that relies on me showing up to announce a long-term care, a hospital, a new company that's going up in the north. It's part of the job.
It's part of the job because it's politics. He goes up there to make announcements because he wants to be in front of the cameras. I mean, yeah, I guess technically it is part of the job, but no, he doesn't need to go there. There's a lot of things the government does that you just find out about because they published it in the Gazette or they sent out a press release saying, hey, yeah, this is going to happen. They don't necessarily need Doug Ford to be there, but that doesn't mean he doesn't need to be there. If he's the premier of the province, he's got to be visible in all parts of the province. He's got to represent all parts of the province. I understand that. I understand the argument he's making. But this is still kind of a shady situation here. By the way, I am now 6 minutes into this statement from Doug Ford. He is speaking with no notes, and so far he has not been asked a single question. You can tell this was on his mind all weekend. He's been stewing over this one, and no doubt he has heard it from other members of the Ontario PC Party. No doubt regular MPPs are getting blasted by their constituents, and that sort of stuff is getting run right up to the premier's office. No doubt he has heard an earful about this plane purchase for him to reverse course after just 2 days.
So that's the other side of the story. And one last thing, because it's all around cost and money, right? Everyone's talking about the money. And I've saved millions by not flying the King Air and so on and so forth. I'm the only, and I never brought this up, but since I'm getting hammered about the money, I'm the only premier or MPP for their MPP expenses, which I don't begrudge. Everyone needs to have expenses. I have expensed zero. Think of that. Zero for 8 years. I pay for it out of my own pocket, and I don't begrudge any MPPs. I'm just saying, if you're talking, nickels and dimes and dollars and hundreds and thousands of dollars, I pay out of my own pocket. And I've never promoted that. But since it's all about dollars and cents, I have to tell the people of Ontario that's what's happening. I'll always be frugal. I'll always respect the taxpayers' money, and I'll always listen and never be too shy. Like a lot of politicians, they dig their heels in. I think I've proven over and over and over again, if I hear from the people they don't like it, I change my mind.
Oh my God. I got to clip that sound bite. I got to clip that one. That one's great.
If I hear from the people they don't like it, I change my mind.
If I hear from the people and they don't like it, I'll change my mind.
I change my mind.
Okay, people don't want these OSAP cuts. Change your mind, Doug. Nobody wants those cuts. Nobody wants them the way you're doing them. Change your mind.
If I hear from the people they don't like it, I change my mind.
You serious? Nobody wants these freedom of information changes made. Nobody.
If I hear from the people they don't like it, I change my mind.
Imagine that, coming out and trying to gaslight and guilt Canadians like that. I'm the only one who doesn't submit any expenses. Well, let's be clear about what expenses the premier might incur. So when he goes to work, he has a car and driver. They pick him up, they drive him to Queen's Park, they take him home afterwards. No, you don't get to, he didn't chip in any money to fill the tank, so no, he doesn't get to submit expenses. When he goes out on the road, he's not filling up the tank. The OPP does that. What expenses did he get that he's just, I'm going to eat those and do it for the people? What expenses are you not submitting? And by the way, you're right. If somebody does incur an expense in the process of doing business on behalf of the people, they should submit that expense and be reimbursed. Which expenses specifically are you hanging on to? And why are you trying to guilt the public over that? This guy makes over $300,000 a year. Yeah, I don't think it would be appropriate for you to invoice the Timmy's breakfast sandwich that you bought on the way to work. That would not be appropriate. I'm fine. You can pay for that out of your own pocket. What a wild finish to this news conference. If the public doesn't like it, I'll change my mind. There's a lot of things that people don't like right now. And he's not changing his mind on those things. He's changing his mind on this thing. And I'm pretty sure that if it was an overnight poll that they did, they got an earful there. And then when they heard from their constituents, they got an earful there. I'm pretty sure the backlash on this was like nothing they've ever seen before. This scandal, it should be done. I mean, after I finish this news conference and there's only like a little bit more that I'm going to play, then this issue should be done. But I'm not sure if it's going to be. Is Doug going to keep doing this, woe is me, I got caught, now I can't have my jet? I don't know. And I'm one who's saying he should have a jet. Well, he should have access to a jet. How about that? I just want to be smart about the money. Yeah, he's right. He's got to get places. We've got to get him places. So if flying is the best option, then let's figure out the best option for flying. It doesn't make sense to have the premier flying commercial. He's too popular. He's going to cause chaos at the airport. Doesn't make sense. Get him private. Get them on a charter. Doesn't matter to me how they do it. Get them from A to B and do it in the most cost-effective way possible. Hey, part of the reason we're short on money is Doug Ford's been premier for 8 years. 8 budgets. Highest deficit in history. Highest debt in history. There's your money, Doug. Hey, how about that? How about you balance the budget? And then you can go out and buy a whole fleet of planes if you want. I don't care. Save us money, and then nobody's going to care what you spend money on. How about that?
I changed my mind. That's where we're at, folks. I'll take any questions.
Was there any reason that you didn't go out and sort of make the case for this plane and just in the last few moments?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I told my team 100% I should have been out there and made the case and given the why. So, yes, that was what I should have, and I didn't. It was on a Friday. We took possession. I can't remember, Wednesday or Thursday. We put the story out there, and I should have done it. So you're 100% right. And that's why I'm here today, to tell the other side of the story. Next question.
You pride yourself in your political career on being able to read public opinion.
That's right.
But to this whole scenario, how it went wrong, how did it go wrong? Who had the idea to buy the plane and then not do the business case for it?
So at the end of the day, folks, everything falls on my shoulders. I take full responsibility. But again, when we're under scrutiny, and I'm under scrutiny more than the Prime Minister, more than any Premier in the entire country. When you see the federal government go out, and the inconsistencies from the media is just mind-boggling to me, which I agree with them buying a fleet of planes for the ministers, because they have to travel. I'm in favor of it. But spending $753 million compared to the $29 million, folks, Ontario is the 20th largest GDP economy in the world. I'm going to repeat that. 20th largest GDP in the world. I have to get around. I have to go to the U.S. more. I have to head to Utah to meet the governors.
Personally, I wish he'd stay out of the States. The reason we don't have a deal with the Americans right now, a lot of people suspect, is because Doug Ford intentionally tanked it back in November. Now, whether or not Carney asked him to do it or he just did it of his own volition, it doesn't change the fact that Doug Ford is the one who's being blamed for the fact that we didn't do a deal in November. Him and his tariff ad. Doug Ford constantly taunting Donald Trump. Doug Ford banning American alcohol. I'm surprised they let him in the States, to be honest with you. I'm going to move on from this, friends. It sounds like sour grapes to me. I don't know. It seems like the premier was in a real bad mood when he did this news conference, and I'm sure it was not a pleasant weekend for him. I still see the upside to having the ability to move him around with a plane. I just think they could have done it differently. Clearly, Doug is, he seems like a kid who got in trouble from his parents. That's the way this news conference came off to me. I'm hearing him say, I'm sorry. I'm hearing him say, yeah, we'll send it back. But it doesn't sound like he regrets the decision. It sounds like he regrets that he didn't explain it differently. Whatever. Hey, he's the premier. He can do whatever he wants, I guess. That's the guy who's going to be coming back to you in the next couple of years and asking for your vote. Or will he? I don't know that he will. I didn't think he was going to before this scandal broke. Now, it really doesn't seem likely. But hey, Doug, I'll put the invite out like I always do. If you want to talk about the state of Ontario, give me a call. You just mentioned that Ontario has the 20th highest GDP economy in the world. Okay, well, we also have millions of people lined up for food banks. We have crises after crises happening right now. Crime-riddled streets. A whole bunch of issues. So while the GDP may be good, the average household is not feeling it. People are broke, and they don't want to see politicians living high on the hog while they're struggling to put food on the table. And I think that's the important part that the premier is missing here. I do want to play something else from Doug Ford, but it is not from this particular news conference. He was talking to the media, and this was after a meeting with the premiers. And Doug Ford brought up something that I think is important for you to hear, because one of the things that we hear a lot about lately is MOUs. Memorandums of Understanding. And the Prime Minister is traveling all around the world trying to sign trade deals with middle power countries, but he hasn't come back with any trade deals. He's come back with MOUs. And those on the left like to say it's the same thing. You're making a big deal out of nothing. The MOU is good. Well, here's Doug Ford explaining, no, an MOU doesn't mean anything.
To get something done by the end of this May. Like, we all have MOUs. We've signed MOUs, right? But that's just a piece of paper. Let's get a binding agreement to start moving. Either, you're in or you're out. Well, let's start moving.
How broad? Like, what kind of an agreement are you talking about?
Just a binding agreement rather than just an MOU. These are official. We put everything to the side and opened up Ontario for everyone. There's still a little bit of protectionism within.
A little bit of protectionism. These premiers have done a terrible job at ripping down the interprovincial trade barriers. The federal government cleared the way for this to be done last year on Canada Day. And there are still massive barriers between our provinces. What happened to creating one economy instead of 13? The premiers can't figure it out. Simple stuff like moving alcohol back and forth over borders. We're still screwing each other, and it's the taxpayers that pay. Friends, I'm going to leave it at that. That's my time for today. This was a very Ontario-centric episode. I know tomorrow I'll try and diversify a little bit more and touch a few other parts of the country. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will catch you right back here in less than 24 hours. Right now, I'll leave you with the sounds of Pat James and the whole truth. Hey now.
Oh, yeah.
Now at McDonald's, a sausage McMuffin is only $1.50. So stop dreaming about breakfast sausage and go get it. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience and their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.